Anti-Trump protests are exploding, and October 18th could be the biggest one yet. I think this is awesome. Organizers say that there's over 2,100 separate demonstrations planned across all 50 states. There's more than the millions who hit the streets in June, hopefully planning to protest. There was the first No King's Day of Action. This is another No King's Day of Action, October 18th. Now, here's the important aspect to this. History shows us that numbers alone don't guarantee success. If we go back to like the height of the Vietnam War protests, you had demonstrations with 500,000 people in Washington, D.C., but it was still a tiny fraction of the country. We now have 330, 340 million people living in the United States. Even 5 or 6 million people turning out is huge, but it's also 1.5% to 2% of the population. And what political scientists will tell you is that to really topple a regime or force major change, you usually need sustained engagement from like 3 to 6% of the whole population. Now, that's a lot of people, but it's also not completely unrealistic. If October 18th doesn't surpass the June numbers, I fear it's going to be seen more as symbolic rather than decisive and influential. And if there is really an appetite for change here, we got to get those numbers up. And we need October 18th to be even bigger. Now, this ties into a second problem. The style of these protests, if the next No King's Day looks like the last one, which is, and I don't say this negatively, more carnival than anything else, I don't know that Trump's necessarily going to sweat it. And I think it's great that the protests were positive and they weren't violent because I'm against violence. Like that's all good stuff. But one of the things about protests that influence change is that they make people uncomfortable. They have to, in some way, suspend business as usual, impact the status quo. Now, to me, that doesn't mean riots. It doesn't mean property crime. It doesn't mean any of that. But it does have to, in some way, be disruptive. This is what history tells us. And so the question is, given the geography of the United States, a very big country with some large areas that are relatively sparsely populated, with people in circumstances where many people can't afford to really take time off from work to protest, right? You have all these different things. What is it that could happen that will create leverage by interfering with business as usual? Blocking a freeway in your own backyard and just making your own neighbors angry at you, I don't think that that's really an effective method. I've talked about that before. The people that we're really trying to protest here, Republicans in Congress, Republican governors, Trump's allies, they're not even in a lot of these places. They're in red districts, they're in rural strongholds, they're behind gates and private security, and many of them are in Washington, D.C. And so because the United States doesn't necessarily have like a central seat of power, we have D.C., but there's not a central seat of power like, for example, Paris in France. That's like the one place. We've got D.C., New York, L.A., Houston, Chicago, San Francisco, Atlanta. It's almost like a cloud-based government in the United States. It's decentralized in a way. It's harder to concentrate pressure. This is just a reality. So that gets to the question of outcomes. What is the goal here? With Black Lives Matter in 2020, it was constant presence in the streets to force mayors and police departments to respond. There were clear policy debates around funding and accountability and training that came out of it. The anti-Trump protest that is not only broad in its goals, but decentralized, risks, as awesome as I think it risks not having a coherent ask. Is this about ICE raids? Is it about defending democracy? Is it about shutting down military deployments to cities? And I wonder, and this is just me thinking out loud, does it make sense that it have some kind of specific focus? And I know, well, it's no kings, it's anti-authoritarian. Cool. I'm wondering, how can it be bigger? How can it be more sustained? How can it have a clear message? What could it be that really tips this administration into a further collapse? The administration is wobbling right now. The deportation blitz has backfired, and The deployment of troops into cities is just increasingly desperate. Federal judges are saying you can't do a lot of this stuff. So, number one, we need turnout to surpass that of the June No King's Day. It can't look like just another day in the park with a couple megaphones or whatever. But then the big picture is, what is the ask here? I am very excited for this. I'll be participating myself. I want to get at least that 3%, which would be like 9.5, 10 million people out there. It's a stretch goal, but it's doable. But we need to figure out how to make this as effective as possible. And I hope that the organizers do.